Are we watching the birth of a new Cold War or the beginning of a new world order? For more than 30 years, the world had only one true center of power. What happens when a second power rises strong enough to challenge it? In a pivotal moment of recent history, two of the most powerful men on the planet met face to face in Beijing. Air Force One touched down as China rolled out its full ceremonial pomp, red carpets, and immaculate honor guards. Donald Trump had returned to China, transformed from the optimistic deal-maker of 2017 into a president in his second term, leading a superpower that is no longer the only one writing the rules of the world. This summit was far more than a routine diplomatic meeting. It was the formal recognition that the unipolar era born after the Cold War had finally ended, and that the planet was entering a new bipolar age dominated by the United States and China. So what really happened in Beijing? What are the 5 critical battlegrounds that were negotiated behind closed doors? And how will this new bipolar world actually look in the coming decades? This is context. To understand the importance of this meeting, we need to look back nearly 9 years. In 2017, Trump visited China for the first time, and Xi Jinping welcomed him with an impressive display that included a military parade. Both leaders projected an image of mutual understanding and promised major deals. That phase lasted only a few months. What followed was one of the most serious trade wars since the Great Depression. Trump imposed unprecedented tariffs. Biden kept and deepened many of those measures, and China responded by adapting, accelerating its technological self-sufficiency and expanding its global influence. The United States, for its part, maintained its leadership in innovation, semiconductors, and military power, but it also accumulated a national debt exceeding $38 trillion and sank deeper into intense political polarization. Trump arrived at this summit facing a China that was stronger in some aspects and more vulnerable in others, and it was precisely that shared vulnerability that forced them to sit down at the same table. Total confrontation was no longer sustainable. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, Washington was being forced to accept the existence of a true strategic equal. The two powers would now have to learn how to coexist, negotiate, and divide global influence in a way both sides could tolerate. But what does that coexistence actually look like? This new bipolar world will not look exactly like the Cold War. There will be no complete separation of economies, nor entirely irreconcilable ideologies. Instead, we are entering a competition between two different versions of capitalism, one more liberal and decentralized, the other more state-driven and centralized. Over time, the planet will likely divide into subtle but clear spheres of influence. Asia, especially the Indo-Pacific, will become China's primary strategic sphere. The Western world will remain largely aligned with the United States, and regions such as Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East will become arenas of intense but controlled competition, where both powers will fight for influence through money, technology, infrastructure, trade, and investment, rather than direct military confrontation. In this new order, true neutrality may become increasingly difficult. Every country will eventually be forced to choose how closely it wants to align with one side or the other. But how will these two powers actually compete? What are they fighting over? That is where specificity matters. This summit in Beijing did not revolve around a single issue. In reality, Trump and Xi were negotiating simultaneously across 5 major strategic fronts. How each of these fronts is resolved will largely define the shape of the new bipolar order that is now emerging. The first front is Iran and global energy control. The ongoing war has triggered extreme volatility in oil prices and once again placed the Strait of Hormuz at the center of global geopolitical attention. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows through this vital choke point. China is Iran's largest customer for crude oil and maintains considerable diplomatic influence in Tehran. Facing significant domestic pressure from rising energy prices and economic instability, Trump needs Xi to use his leverage to help stabilize markets and prevent further escalation. This is an unusual situation in modern history. The United States turning to China for help in the Middle East. The second battleground is Taiwan. probably the most delicate and dangerous issue of all. For China, Taiwan is a non-negotiable red line. It is not simply a geopolitical dispute. It is an issue of sovereignty, national reunification, and historical legitimacy. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan is the island that escaped during the Chinese Civil War, autonomous, democratic, and prosperous, but still Chinese territory that was never fully reintegrated. The United States, meanwhile, continues to sell advanced weapons to Taiwan while maintaining a carefully calculated policy of strategic ambiguity. Publicly, Washington does not promise to defend the island, but it also refuses to rule out the possibility. Both leaders understand the same harsh reality. Taiwan is the one issue that could trigger a direct military confrontation between the world's two largest nuclear powers, and this is where pragmatism collides with ideology. The question being negotiated quietly behind closed doors is whether both sides can reach some kind of temporary understanding, some ambiguous status for Taiwan that neither Beijing nor Washington finds completely intolerable. The third front is trade and tariffs. The trade war that began in 2018 never truly ended. It only evolved, became more sophisticated, and turned into a long-term strategic contest. Trump's objectives are clear: reduce America's massive trade deficit with China, boost high-value U.S. exports, and force open Chinese markets that have long remained difficult for foreign companies to access. China, on the other hand, is looking for predictability and stability. It wants the removal or reduction of many of the tariffs and technological restrictions that were imposed during Trump's first term and largely maintained under Biden. Both sides fully understand the same uncomfortable truth. A full-scale new escalation in the trade war would not only damage their own economies, it would send shockwaves through the entire global system, which remains deeply interdependent on commerce between the world's two largest economies. That is precisely why this front remains one of the most critical and most negotiable issues on the table in Beijing. The fourth front is the new arms race in technology: artificial intelligence, advanced semiconductors, quantum computing, and next-generation innovation. This is the true battlefield that will decide who dominates the 21st century. On the American side, Trump brought the heavyweights. Companies like Nvidia, Tesla, Apple, and Google are physically present in his delegation. They are not just advisors, they are the real players in this contest. China, meanwhile, has long since stopped playing catch-up. It now leads in several critical practical fields: electric vehicles, solar batteries, 5G infrastructure in key markets, and applied artificial intelligence. The decisions being negotiated are monumental: restrictions on semiconductor chips, the future of AI research cooperation or separation, and whether the world will have common technological standards or two parallel systems. Whatever is agreed or not agreed in Beijing will have profound consequences for who controls the global economy, military superiority, and technological sovereignty for the coming decades. Finally, the fifth front is control over rare earth minerals and critical materials. China dominates nearly 90% of the world's processing capacity for rare earth elements. These are not just rocks, they are the invisible foundation of modern technology. From electric vehicle motors to fighter jet engines, from AI servers to advanced batteries and missiles, almost everything that powers the 21st century depends on them. This is a silent but extraordinarily powerful geopolitical weapon. It does not require aircraft carriers, missiles, or armies. It only requires control of the global supply chain and the willingness to use that control as leverage. So what happens next? How does this new world actually function? That is the question that matters now, because the decisions being negotiated in Beijing are not about who wins and who loses. They are about how two superpowers learn to coexist without destroying each other. The international system that emerged after the Cold War is beginning to fracture. Supply chains are separating. Technological ecosystems are diverging. Neutrality is becoming increasingly impossible. Countries across the world will be forced to navigate between two competing centers of power, each pulling the global order toward its own vision of the future. The decisions negotiated behind closed doors in Beijing may determine not only the future of the United States and China, but the shape of the international order itself. Because the unipolar era is over. What emerges is not a return to the past. It is something entirely new. A world where power is shared, contested, and negotiated. No walls, no clear sides, just two powers that must coexist. That is the world we are entering. This is context.